Hello, and welcome to the Discover Florida Tours YouTube channel. Today we're hopping on the Tamiami Trail and taking the Collier Boulevard exit towards Marco Island, Muspa, to meet the world-famous Key Marco cat. The Marco cat is a small statue carved from native hardwood depicting a cat-like being with some anthropomorphized features. It has been described as one of the finest pieces of pre-Columbian Native American art ever found. The Marco cat is about 6 inches tall and weighs 197.5 grams. That's about the same as 4 individual Pop-Tarts. It was found in a pit of anoxic black muck by Smithsonian anthropologist Frank Hamilton Cushing on March 5, 1896. Many of the objects pulled from the mud by Cushing disintegrated immediately upon exposure to air, but the Marco cat remained preserved in full detail, right down to its individually carved fingers. Let's discuss its posture. The Marco cat is kneeling down and leaning slightly forward. Its shoulders are shrugged inwardly, and its hands are perched on its lap, palms flat. To me, it looks like the Marco cat is about to whisper a secret, but it could be waiting for you to speak first. When I first saw it, I thought the Marco cat looked like something from ancient Egypt or Assyria, but it was actually made by people living half a world away in southwest Florida. People who built elaborate settlements on huge piles of shell above the waters of the 10,000 Islands in the distant past. The 10,000 Islands region of Florida makes up a giant archipelago. An archipelago is an expanse of water with numerous scattered islands. A green labyrinth of land and water today, the 10,000 Islands are the remnants of a submergent coastline. A submergent coastline is a coastal area that has been inundated by rising seas. Some of the islands that constitute the 10,000 Islands are little more than mangroves growing on oyster bars, but others are the peaks of ancient hills and sand dunes, and some of the larger islands are more than 30 feet above sea level, quite surprising for southwest Florida. And that's where archaeologists have found the remains of archaic civilizations. It appears that people called the Muspa and their ancestors have lived and fished around these waters since a time before the first Egyptian pyramids were ever built. There is clear evidence of a village near Marco Island that dates back to nearly 7,000 years before the present. The people who lived here built a U-shaped ring of shells on a dune surrounding a central plaza that was 45 feet above sea level, and more than 600 overlapping post molds have been discovered. These post molds contain organic traces of the wooden supports that once held up archaic buildings. Fish, wildlife, and edible plants were so abundant in the shallow estuarine environment that the ancient civilizations of the 10,000 Islands were able to achieve a high level of social and political complexity without the need for large-scale agriculture. They took most of what they needed directly from the sea, but also managed to enjoy papaya, chili peppers, squash, kunti, sea grape, prickly pear, palmetto berries, hearts of palm, grapes, and yaupon holly tea. It's estimated that 30,000 people lived in southwest Florida when the first Europeans arrived in the 16th century, a number that was not exceeded until well into the 20th century. The people who lived on Marco Island from about 500 BC until 1300 AD represent a society known from pottery studies as the Glades culture. Ceramics found on Marco Island from this time show distinctly Glades-style features, including typical Glades decorative patterns and materials. Pottery was made quite differently further north in the Caloosahatchee River area, a region associated with the Calusa people. Around 1300 AD, pottery from Marco changed and began to match that of the Calusa, no longer showing the hallmarks of the Glades region. Archaeologists believe that around this time, the increasingly powerful Calusa may have absorbed or entirely replaced the Glades people living on Marco Island. Early European maps from the 1500s reference a place called Muspa or Muspa Island, and there is lots of evidence to indicate that this is today's Marco Island. By the time the Spanish arrived, the transition from Glades to Calusa had already taken place. According to Hernando de Escalante Fontaneda, who was shipwrecked at the age of 13 and lived with the Calusa for 17 years, and Father Rogel, a priest who came to convert the Calusa, Muspa was the Calusa name for an island city ruled by Carlos, which was the name they used to refer to the leader of the Calusa. Today, scholars use Muspa to refer to the Glades-era population of Marco Island in order to differentiate them from the later Calusa-influenced residents. As for Marco, since the Spanish called the Calusa leader Carlos, it makes sense to me that in the following centuries, someone might have Latinized Muspa to Marco. But getting back to the cat, experts can only agree that the Marco cat was carved sometime between 500 AD and 1500 AD. That means the cat could have either been carved by Glades-era Muspa people or the Calusa who replaced them. This wooden object survived intact because, when Frank Hamilton Cushing found it in 1896, it was buried in an oxygen-free layer of black muck. There were other artifacts in the muck as well, including more animal carvings, wooden face masks, and vibrant drawings, but many of them are said to have disintegrated immediately upon exposure to air. My friend Stuart Brown's favorite member of the Cushing expedition was a young painter and photographer named Wells Sawyer, who was sent along to document the dig. Sawyer's watercolors are unfortunately the only record we have of many of their most amazing discoveries. How these seemingly important objects ended up in the muck in the first place is still anyone's guess. They may have been put there intentionally, but it's also possible they were buried quickly and unintentionally in a catastrophic event like a hurricane. As for the meaning of the Marco cat, it may have had some ceremonial or religious significance that could give us a greater insight into the culture of early Floridians. The Calusa certainly had some interesting religious beliefs connected to animals, which they held true to despite the best efforts of Catholic missionaries to dispel them. These include a unique version of reincarnation. Father Rogel wrote that, quote, "They believed when a man dies, his soul enters into some animal or fish, and when they kill such an animal, it enters into a lesser one, so that little by little, the soul reaches the point of being reduced into nothing." The Calusa made offerings to their ancestors and believed in an afterlife in which a person's soul lived on in the natural environment. Could objects like the Marco cat or this wooden wolf head with an articulating jaw be part of a spiritual tradition of ancestor worship? The fact that we don't know is a reminder of how frustratingly little we understand about Florida's original people, and unfortunately, the Spaniards who actually met and interacted with the Calusa had other motivations and could hardly be considered anthropologists. Let's talk about how the Marco cat was discovered. In April of 1895, Captain William David Collier, one of Marco Island's pioneer settlers, wanted fertilizer to grow his vegetable crops. A muck pit on the edge of his property provided the nutrient-rich organic material he needed, but as he collected the mud, Collier noticed some carved wooden objects. He told an amateur archaeologist named Charles Wilkins about it, and Wilkins brought news of the find to the University of Pennsylvania. Frank Hamilton Cushing, a visiting anthropologist from the Bureau of Ethnology at the National Museum in Washington, D.C., decided to check out Collier's Florida bog. I wrote a whole lot about Frank Hamilton Cushing for this video, but then decided it was too much and that I would really need to make a separate video. In the meantime, I'll just say that Cushing was born a sickly kid in Pennsylvania, grew up on a farm in New York where he found an arrowhead in a field that inspired him to read every piece of literature on American Indians that he could possibly find. He published a scientific paper at age 17, dropped out of Cornell University at age 19 to take a job at the Smithsonian, and at 22, he went to live with the Zuni people in the American Southwest, where he pioneered participant observation as a research strategy. Cushing learned the Zuni language, adopted their traditional clothes, and was even initiated in the Zuni Bo priesthood, which apparently required producing a scalp. But things ended badly when he refused to marry a Zuni wife, and was later photographed wearing a replica of a sacred mask, which was a big faux pas. A decade later, Cushing was heading to Marco Island. His personal physician, Dr. William Pepper, who, by the way, was also the president of the University of Pennsylvania's archaeology department, thought the climate would help Cushing's chronically bad health, and Dr. Pepper even helped finance the expedition with an understanding that any artifacts recovered would be equally divided between the University of Pennsylvania and the Smithsonian. Cushing and his team left in December of 1895, traveling first to Tarpon Springs, but the boat they had contracted to take them to Marco Island, the Silver Spray, wasn't there when they arrived. It was out on a sponging trip, and so the expedition waited at Tarpon Springs for nearly 3 months. Cushing passed the time by excavating 2 nearby burial mounds, but by the time the boat arrived, he was nearly out of funding. Luckily, Mrs. Phoebe Hearst, philanthropist and mother of publisher William Randolph Hearst, stepped in and agreed to fund the remainder, and the Pepper-Hearst Expedition, as it is now known, continued to Marco in February of 1896. The young painter Wells Sawyer, that's him second from the left in the back row, had a memorable quote upon arriving at Collier's Marco property, which is now known as the Key Marco dig site. Sawyer wrote, quote, "I shall never forget the first impressions of the muck hole in Marco, which had become the famous court of the pile dwellers. The little shoots of mangroves coming up here and there, many curious weeds not growing more than 12 or 16 inches high, all underlain by foul-smelling black muck, into which a few trenches had been dug. These were filled with water, and indeed the whole place was like a thick sponge saturated with water, holding a great quantity of salt and a large variety of smells. We had brought a crew of workmen up the coast, but almost to a man they looked with absolute revolt upon the unpromising hole." Sawyer photographed Cushing's work, but also painted him aboard the Silver Spray, and his paintings of the 10,000 Islands are quite beautiful. Right away, Cushing's team had great success. They pulled more than 1,000 unique artifacts out of the mud over the next few months. Among them included at least 12 animal carvings and 14 wooden face masks. Cushing believed that each animal figure had a matching face mask and that they may have been used in religious ceremonies or spirit transformation rituals. The animals depicted included an alligator, a bear, a deer, a crab, an osprey, a pelican, a sea turtle, and a wolf, but the find that most excited Cushing was the Marco cat. The cat was unearthed on March 5, 1896, and in a letter dated March 7th to Dr. Pepper, Cushing enthusiastically described the artifact as equal in all ways to any statuette from Egypt. Sadly, Cushing's poor health, which had remained an ongoing obstacle throughout his life, prevented him from completing the scholarly work necessary to properly communicate and preserve the significance of his discoveries on Marco Island before he choked on a fishbone and died at the age of 42. More than 100 years later, in 1999, Cushing's unfinished manuscript was found in the National Anthropological Archives in Washington and has helped to renew interest in the Marco cat. Today, true to the original arrangement to split the artifacts found on Marco Island, many of Wells Sawyer's original paintings are on display at the University of Pennsylvania, and the Marco cat belongs to the Smithsonian. However, the cat, wolf, this shell man, and this beautiful gorget made from a lightning whelk shell are currently on loan through the year 2026 to the Marco Island Historical Museum. The Marco cat has had a long journey, but has now returned to its birthplace in the 10,000 Islands. I'll put a link to the museum's website in the description of this video. Marco Island of today is a beautiful place to live and visit, but sadly, it's an archaeological disaster zone. Developers in the 1960s took over and literally carved out most of the island with heavy equipment to build a network of canals and water accesses. With so much of the island turned over, hauled away, or used as fill, it's doubtless that many priceless historical objects were destroyed in the process. Luckily, in the 21st century, there are lots more people who really care about historic preservation, and hopefully we will continue to find hidden windows into the past of our beautiful Sunshine State. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and check out one of these other videos I made about Florida. We'll be back with lots more, but for now, thanks for watching, and thanks for discovering Florida with us.